Welcome to the Good Book Club podcast, where we make all our book club meetings available for viewers and listeners to enjoy. Our book this month was Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism by linguist Amanda Montell. Through juicy storytelling and cutting original research, Montell exposes the verbal elements that make a wide spectrum of communities cultish, revealing how they affect followers of groups as notorious as Heaven's Gate, but also how they pervade our modern startups, Peloton leaderboards, and Instagram feeds. Incisive and darkly funny, this enrapturing take on the curious social science of power and belief will make you hear the fanatical language of cultish everywhere. We found this book fascinating, and we know you will too. The Good Book Club meeting was originally held on March 9th, 2025. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Good Book Club. It is already March. I can't believe it. This year is already going so fast. It's March 9th, and we have daylight savings today. So it's really funny. All of us are kind of like, what time is it? Where is it? I feel like a lot of people are going to join us an hour into it. We will see what happens. Anyway, welcome, everybody. I'm going to start out by reading our mission statement. We always do that at the beginning of each of our book clubs. It's the Good Book Club mission statement. The Good Book Club was created to bring together nuanced Mormons, post-Mormons, and others with a shared interest in Mormonism. We are introspective, critical thinkers seeking to learn, connect, and build relationships through the catalyst of literature. We welcome all who are searching for a safe space to share authentic thoughts, feelings, and ideas through open dialogue and shared experiences relative to Mormon culture. As we deconstruct previous beliefs, we encourage all to find happiness in the process of discovering new religious ideologies, spirituality, and life philosophies. So, the Good Book Club has been around for 5-ish years now, and we really do try to use this as our guide as we choose books and have discussions. And I think we've done a pretty good job. So I love to read that at the top of each hour. Let's go through a few little things really quick. The Good Book Club represented at Thrive. Here's some fun pictures. We got to meet Nemo. That was pretty awesome. You can see that picture on the lower right. Landon is helping Nemo. Yeah, if you're questioning what's happening there, Nemo received some cowboy boots from somebody and he wore them all day. And then he's like, how do I get these off? And Landon's like, let me show you. So we showed him the American way that you take off a cowboy boot. So Nemo looks a little confused there, but yeah, that was wonderful. Really great discussions. And next year, it's going to be in February again. It's going to be like the 20-something. I would encourage everybody to go if you can.
Yes.
In fact, we're even talking about a lot of book club members have expressed interest in having some, book club meetups while we're down there, maybe even having a table representing the Good Book Club to let people know what we're all about and present that opportunity if they'd like to join us. So we'll get more information out about that, but it really is a fun experience to attend Thrive. And we met so many people that, knew of the Good Book Club and talked to us about that and some other things. So, and there's Bill Reel, can't forget him. So, all right, let's go to the next one. There we go. I want to remind everybody that in April, this is coming up quick, the Bible says so, what we get right and wrong about Scripture's most controversial issues. Now, this is the date that the book is going to be released. You can pre-order it. We will already go on record saying that we are going to choose this as one of our books for the next season. And I'm pretty sure I can talk Dan into coming in on the book club that day. So that'll be sometime next year, but this April 29th day is the day that the book is released. So everybody go pre-order. He's already getting, it's so funny, he's already getting all these like negative, how dare you say that? So that's always really interesting. When you try to tell people what the Bible really is, you often face pushback. So kind of like the Book of Mormon. Anyway, so on the radar. We also want to let everybody know in May, our book is The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity. This is a longer book. I think Melissa has already downloaded it on Audible, said it was like 26 hours long. So we're putting this out there for two reasons. One, to tell you, get a jump on this if you have already finished our book or are almost finished with our April book. And also, if you notice the date, book club is always, with a little asterisk, on the second Sunday of each month, but the second Sunday of May We all know what that is. That's Mother's Day. And I think that would make a lot of people cranky if we stole their mother or father for book club, or if they just didn't show up. So we are moving that, as we do every year, to May 19th. So make a note of that schedule change right there. And it's good because it gives us a little more time to read that pretty hefty book. So, but it's going to be amazing. And we did find someone to present for that. We had been looking. So we are ready to go on May 19th. So put that on your calendar, everybody. Our book for next month, regular time, second Sunday, is Homo Deus. This is Yuval Noah Harari. We've already read Sapiens in the book club. That's actually the book that started the book club, if you're familiar with that story. And now we're going to read the second in his series. I just actually bought the box set of 3 of them together. Really nice. And so this will be on the 13th. And Bruce is our discussion leader. At the end of our discussion today, he will give a little preview to get us all pumped up about this one. But I don't think there can be anything more timely than reading this. It's going to be really interesting. So that's coming up.
Yeah, and it looks like we had the wrong date. It's May 18th. Someone was putting in the chat. The 18th is the Sunday.
Okay.
So
May 18th.
it's the third Sunday, regardless of what that says.
The third Sunday, yes. Pay no attention to us. We're just doing the best we can. So, anyway,
it's been a day.
What, Melissa?
It's been a day.
It's been a day for all of us. That's right.
Day.
Well, it's the third week, and we'll put tons of information out about that. So, okay, now on to the main event. Cultish. Oh my gosh, this book has really been causing waves and ripples. People reading this have been really impacted. I think The Language of Fanaticism, and we have the amazing Jackie, who is going to be our discussion leader today. And I've had a preview of her presentation. This is going to be fantastic. We're just going to turn it over now to Jackie.
You're muted, Jackie.
Who is muted? Again, it's a day, right?
Everyone else needs to mute except
okay,
Jackie.
I just lost my screen for that.
Oh, perfect. Muted and no screen. We're going to move from here.
Hang on. Just a minute. I'll get there. Wow.
Right.
That's been a long time since I had it up too. So that I wouldn't do this.
Let's see. Bruce, was Jackie sharing? Is Jackie going to share her slides, or there we go? I think that'll work.
I'm going to get there. Just a minute.
Yeah.
That's not it either. Dang it.
That's a very cute little VW.
Let me stop sharing for a minute. Yeah.
Go out and come back in. So.
Hang on. Just talk. I'm so
talk
sorry.
amongst yourselves. So
yeah.
Had anybody read Cultish before? We suggested it for book club. I had never. Oh, you had read it. Cameron is saying that he'd read it before. So yeah, it was, I mean,
like a Monday, Sunday.
Yeah, exactly. Some things you're like, okay, obviously that's a cult. That's a cult. That's a cult. But then we got into some areas where I was like, I wonder how how do I feel about that being called a cult? And I know we're going to get to that later in the presentation.
Yeah, I didn't know I was in a cult.
Yeah. Karen, you're like, I'm not in a cult.
I think that I have it under now. I think I've got it now.
Okay, the other option is I think you shared that with Landon or Bruce. Perhaps
I did.
You could help and just pull that up right now so we could get
I got it.
We always try to have a backup.
Sorry. This was like I haven't done this for a while.
Okay. There we go. There we go.
I think we're good now. Yay.
I think we're good. Yay.
Okay, so this book had so much in it. I think that all of us that read it can agree with that. I like that she started out with how the word cult hasn't always had a negative association. In the 17th century, cult was more innocuous. It meant a homage paid to divinity or offerings made to win over the gods. I think we always tend to think of it now as a negative thing. I like that she pointed out culture and cultivation are close word cousins to cult. So, that gave me some food for thought too. The United States has had a long relationship with cults that is bigger than other countries for whatever reason. We always have to do everything bigger and better. In the 19th century, the term served as a type of classification to something new or orthodox. This kind of made me think, when did Joseph Smith found Mormonism? In the 19th century. So there were polyamorous communists and vegan farmers. Those were all cults in the 19th century in the United States. In the 1960s and 1970s, during something called the Fourth Great Awakening, which, we all look at the 60s and 70s in a way of like kind of nostalgia nowadays. This is when the word cult started to take on darker undertones. And this is when it started to become associated with charlatans, quacks, and heretical kooks. And cult was not considered something that was a societal menace until after the Manson family and Jonestown. So I thought a quick history was good to think that it went from being something like kind of safe to now we think of it as something pretty dangerous. The word cult, she points out, has become a symbol of fear, as words often do. The word has become too scary, too overused, and experts tend to shy away from it. Just because once you give a word like that such power, anything that's associated with it becomes very, very negative. The author turns to the word cultish, and I was just wondering if everybody thought that, what did they think about that? Is this a good pivot instead of just calling it a cult outright, that we use the word cultish instead? So that was kind of my first question to the group. How do you guys think? Is this a good pivot? Yeah, Bruce. You're muted.
Yep, there we go. Yeah, I like cultish because it's a little bit light. Like with my believing Mormon families, I never use the term cult, but I openly use high demand religion. And they all go, oh yeah, it's a high demand religion. So cultish is kind of a lighter, nicer way to approach it, especially when people are in cults.
So kind of like cult light. Yeah.
Yeah, cult light.
Okay, Cameron.
Yeah, I at first I liked the cultish pivot because I think it does take some of the, edginess off of cult being so like negative always, but I still think there is some edginess to it. So like in my mind, we were talking with some friends last night about like I like to run a lot and I'm really into it. And so I think it's kind of geeky or nerdy and there's only like a small percentage of people that really get into it as much as me. I like have more than 10 pairs of running shoes. I have all these little obsessions that I do. And so I kind of like the terms like nerddom or fandom or geekdom to describe like something that's kind of niche but also doesn't have to be necessarily a negative thing. And so I don't know. I'm going to push back against the cultish just a little bit because I think, negatively portraying other groups, as a way to like be judgmental of them. I don't think that's good for society in general. So unless it's a Jonestown kind of really, really extreme situation, but just some thoughts.
Yeah, that makes sense. Dave.
I like the word cultish because it allows for gradations. We don't have to worry about this dichotomy or this, you either are a cult or you're not a cult. It allows for an organization group to have attributes or signs of a cult without having to place it in one camp or the other.
So like on the spectrum. Yeah. Landon.
Yeah, I was okay with the word cultish. I kind of though take it with religion. I've kind of felt like it was overreach on some of these where we were going to like Cameron said, running or exercising and stuff like that. And MLMs I kind of saw as I don't know if I see an MLM as a cult. I see an MLM as someone who likes to utilize cult groups to help sell a product because they already have a built-in customer base. Everyone has these big friend groups, but I don't know that I'd go that far. So in the book, as I was reading it, I was kind of going back and forth going, well, I don't know if I'd call that a cult, but the word itself when applied to, like the LDS religion, people say, is it a cult? And I don't know, but it's definitely cult-like or cultish. So yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay. All right, Bruce. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the little hallmarks is a cult, I think, wants your money, wants to tell you what to do, and then often devolves into wanting to have sex with your wife and daughters or any permutation of that.
Yeah, good point. Okay. All right. So I as well was kind of like, okay, cultish. I like it because it kind of like puts it on a spectrum, but then again, it's like it still has a super negative, in my way, connotation. So I just kind of kept that in my mind of how I felt internally about using the word cult.
Okay, Chuck has his hand up. It's
Oh,
hard to
Chuck.
see the hand
Oh, I
with your
can't see it on his
background.
green screen. Now I
Yeah,
see it. Sorry, Chuck, I
yeah.
didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
That's okay. I like cultish, especially because it sounds like a language. Do you speak cultish? Which gives it a double meaning. So along with what everybody else has said, I like that aspect of it as well.
Oh, okay, good. I will try to see your hand when I'll be aware of that next time. Okay, good. So, I think that I had used this word spectrum just a minute ago. Steve, Hassan, I always know how to say that. He says there's no good cult, bad cult dichotomy. He says it's on a spectrum that goes from a group that's ethical and upfront to one that's destructive and bad. And when she looks at it, it all comes down to words, 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 and how we use those words in the group. So I think I've always been I like language. I like how it's put together. I taught language. I still teach language. And I just have always thought that, yeah, words have so many different ways that you can look at them. So language is the key means by which all degrees of cultish influence happen. The things that influence this are the delivery, the redefinitions of words, the inventions of new words and phrases, powerful euphemisms, secret codes, renamings, buzzwords, chants and mantras. And I looked at this and I thought, okay, how does Mormonism do all of these things? And so Bruce, wow, hands went up. Okay, Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah, I've been an ex-Mormon for years, decades, man. Well, out of the church for a decade, but not going to church for like 4 decades. And I watch Reddit and the ex-Mormon stuff, and the term temporary commandment has come up. Well, I was on a Zoom tech support call with my brother, and he brought up an example of something he wanted to print, and it was an email to his grandson who's on a mission. And in that email, he used the concept of temporary commandment. So that has gotten around, at least I don't remember temporary commandments as being a concept when I was a missionary and stuff. And I saw how fast, my brother's 77, almost 78 years old, using it with his grandson. And that's one of the new words.
That's insane.
At least in Mormondom.
Yeah, when you first mentioned that one to me, I was like, I thought commandments were permanent. I didn't know they were temporary. Landon.
Yeah, just when I don't want to call the Mormon Church a cult, because I don't want to say that I used to belong to a cult. I get these lists and I just go, oh my gosh, they hit every one of these, as I go through them, and I just, the redefinitions is one that's really gotten me in the last couple of years, because translate doesn't mean translate anymore. The major things, that we were taught, they've completely changed the meaning and say, oh, that's not what we meant. It never meant that. And you're going, obviously it meant that. We all knew what it meant, yet you're redefining it. And new words and new phrases. The guy that's in charge right now, Nelson, he's the king of this. He wants to rename, rephrase, rebrand every single part of Mormonism. He's trying to change it. And secret codes, chants, and mantras. It's a shame that I hadn't seen the temple earlier in my Mormon career, because even though I saw it, when I was 19, you're there with your family. That was the moment that I said, wow, this is a little weird, when you're standing in a circle chanting, putting your hands over your head and making signs and stuff. It's a cult. I think the Mormon Church hides these very well. They like to put a mainstream, very nice flush. They look to the world different than they look internal. Once you get internal and they talk to you internally, you get the cult feeling. But they don't put that out as the face of Mormonism. You don't see that cult looking at it from the outside, but once you're inside looking back, you can see it.
So true. Yeah. And I think that renamings, I mean, I thought about the Mormon Tabernacle Choir that's no longer the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. It's like, what? All right, Dave.
Jackie, there's a bullet you just got to add, and that is thought terminating cliches.
Oh, sure.
The author used that phrase throughout the book, and I could tell that she just loved saying that, thought terminating cliches. And she gave examples like,
Yeah.
it is what it is, or it's God's will. And that
Mhm.
kind of ends the conversation. And I was thinking, gee, do we hear those in the LDS church? And absolutely. And the one that comes to mind was when Dieter Uchtdorf said, doubt your doubts.
Mhm.
That's a thought terminating cliche which cults will use.
Yeah, we're actually going to get to that part in later if we get through all of this. There's so much in this book, so thank you for bringing that up right now in case we don't get that far. Yeah, those thought terminating, and I mean, or just like I was thinking at that part of like, we'll just fast and pray about it. Oh, okay, yeah, all right. I mean, that's just okay. What do you do with that, right? Okay, all right. So the word cult, she points out that it doesn't have an academic definition. And she says, she quotes Rebecca Moore, a religion professor, wow, my tongue, in San Diego State University. She says, because it's inherently pejorative, it's simply used to describe groups we don't like. I don't know if I agree with that or not, but I think that it's maybe good to stay away from cults, because she also points out that when groups are identified as cults, there are often unintended violent consequences, such we saw in Waco with the Branch Davidians. And she didn't point out here, but the very Mormon example of this would have been Ruby Ridge as well, that had those violent unintended consequences. So if you don't remember Ruby Ridge, I think it was in the 80s, maybe, right, in Idaho. Where again, the FBI went in and people were killed and it wasn't good. The description is often applied to new religious movements, emerging religions, and marginalized religions. And I think that before the Mormon church became so big, it really would have applied to them. I think it still does apply to them. But she also points out that over time, a cult becomes a religion as it becomes more and more recognized. So the two she pointed out in the book were Catholicism and Mormonism. And she says they've both been around long enough to be considered respectful and have been given the stamp of approval. So just because they outlasted, everybody else, they are now considered a religion. Yeah, Bruce, go ahead.
Okay, so Mormonism and Catholicism are respectable cults.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because there's still so much of the negative that goes along with those. Okay, Catholicism is a couple of thousand-ish years old. Mormonism is still really new, right, and stuff. But yeah, I think as they gain political power, it becomes more respectable. But the control, the money, the sex is still there. And
definitely. Yeah. And I think if they control money, as I got more and more money. Cameron?
I just to add a context or add my perspective on that, I don't know if the author is saying that Catholicism and Mormonism are cults still. I think she's saying they transcended from being cults in small movements to organized religion. I don't think she would say they don't have cult-like behaviors, but I don't think she's saying we should define them as cults. At least that's my impression.
I understand what you're saying. I think her point was that they started out being defined as a cult, and now we define them as a religion because they become more mainstream, and we don't look at them and say. Although growing up Mormons, we always called ourselves a peculiar people. So, I mean, but we've lost that naming too over the last few years. So we've rebranded ourselves, renamed ourselves. But I think you're right about that. Yeah. But if you look into them deep enough, they definitely both have cultish behaviors. Definitely. I believe. I think I'm a little biased, but I think so. Well, okay. So according to this Stephen Kent, who's a sociology professor at the University of Alberta, the term is generally applied to groups. Now, this is all on page 33, that have some degree of supernatural belief, that have a power imbalance based on members' devotion, that have hero worship. Now, remember, these are cult groups definitions, that have absolute trust, which facilitates abuse on part of unaccountable leaders. Oh my. And a rare access, I love this quote, a rare access to transcendent wisdom keeps the trust intact and allows them to exercise control over their systems of rewards and punishments, both here on earth and in the afterlife. So this is definitions of a cult, according to this person. So does any of this sound familiar? Just it all did to me.
I was going to say, I think that's one of the reasons the church is trying to distance itself from Joseph Smith and Brigham Young, besides not just their teachings have been proven to be to be bad, but there was that hero worship of Joseph Smith. People were confused. Is Joseph Smith greater than Jesus? It seemed like. And in fact, I was just we went to a thing for Nemo on Friday at the Holiday City Hall building, and in the City Hall building, they had all these statues sitting there, and the middle one was Joseph Smith, a bust of Joseph Smith's head sitting on the gold plates. That was in the middle of the City Hall building. And then next to it was Jesus, but Jesus was smaller. And I was like, wow, how would anyone feel seeing that here's a city building with Joseph Smith and the gold plates right as you come into the City Hall? That just shows you kind of where we're at or where we've been.
Yeah, and degree of supernatural belief, is there any doubt that seer stones and all of that are supernatural? I mean, basically that's what it was, right? So go ahead, Bruce.
Oh yeah, just the last one, that have absolute trust, which facilitates abuse on the part of unaccountable leaders. I mean, I follow the church on the Salt Lake Tribune and Reddit. So you see all these examples of leaders not reporting child sexual abuse or perpetrating child sexual abuse and being protected by the corporation and stuff. I mean, that's just, classic.
Yeah. I also like there's a power imbalance based on members' devotion. They don't even question it. So they just give over all their autonomy to these people that they believe speak for God. So Yvonne, you're muted.
Oh, yeah. So I just reading those because I'm always thinking like, can I use this to help my family members that I feel like are in some kind of a cult to one degree or another. But I just wanted to point out that all those bullets that this professor gives apply to every religion, don't they? I mean, that really is the definition of religion. So yeah, what do you think? What do you think about that?
That's a really good question. I mean, I don't know that I can speak to every religion. I think sometimes the other religions make their leaders more accountable. I'm tending to think of Episcopals and Baptists. But I don't know. What does anybody else think about that? That's a good question. Anybody have anything? Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah. I had a friend who was a Unitarian minister. I know she talked about publishing their annual budget and having a committee and having the congregation have input on how they spent the total money involved. Who was it? Hinckley? Was it Hinckley? Or Holland said, "Oh yeah, we don't keep our finances, secret from the members who pay into it. We let them see it." Well, a bigger lie has never been told. So my observation.
Good point. Money, that's a good point. Landon?
Yeah, I almost lean towards that every religion is a cult. I mean that, like you said, culture, the word culture comes from that. There used to not even be a differentiation between your culture and your religion. If you came from a certain society, that was your culture was your religion, and you didn't separate the two. By the fact that all religions are there to make you think a certain way and to make you participate and be part of the society they try to keep you in. I think every religion does that. And it's kind of hard to say, you know, you don't want to call everyone a cult, or that just is a turnoff to everyone. But, you know, if you use the pure definitions of it, then I would say yes. But I think I see a couple people in the chat saying, you know, they don't like to use the word cult. And yeah, as soon as you use the word cult, conversation's over. So you don't want to overuse it. But I'm kind of looking, if I look at the technical definition of it, yeah, all religions fall under that to me.
Yeah, I think so, because there's some degree of supernatural belief in all of them, and some degree of hero worship, and yeah. So maybe again, remember the spectrum that that Hassan put it on. You go from these things that are like not so hurtful or good, even, to things that are really horrible. So I think I like that as a spectrum to think about it. Less cultish, more cultish, less high demand, more high demand, whatever we're gonna use. Good
Less
point,
sexual
Scott.
abuse, more sexual abuse.
Yeah. Bruce keeps coming back to that point. That's so true, though. I mean, we were all about that in the beginning with Mormonism. Okay, so coming back to the language itself, because how does language influence behavior, right? We have this theory of performativity. Language does not simply describe or reflect who we are, but it creates who we are. Ooh, that really made me start thinking about this. So some examples that were in the book were making a promise, performing a wedding ceremony. These like all change our who we are, right? Okay. When repeated over and over again, speech has the power to be meaningful and consequential, and ultimately to construct, to build, and to constrain, bring in our reality, right? So it does both. It expands it and it constricts it. When we enmesh ourselves in a community that uses linguistic rituals, we can be drawn away from the real world. What we believe becomes tied up and bound to the group and to the leader. And so I thought, ooh, what kinds of examples do we have in Mormonism about this kind of language that's ritualistic, that binds us to the group? Of course, my first one was baptism, right? And then we'll just kind of throw it out to you guys. Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah, the male conference speaker voice and the cadence, and then the female conference speaker voice, the little girl, just, you know, and that also goes with Relief Society and bearing testimonies and stuff like that. There's that way of talking that's expected that is kind of creepy when you step back from it a little.
Yeah, that primary voice drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead, Landon.
Yeah, sorry to say so much, but I watched last night the interview with Lori Vallow.
So did I.
And wow, that was you know, if you don't think language has one, she was using that primary voice. I felt like she was talking down to the interviewer like he was in primary, you know. She's like, "Really? What do you think?" You know, and she was just going back and forth. But the sad part to me was the things she was saying. I know that the interviewer didn't really understand what she was saying, but me as a Mormon, I understood what she was saying when she would say, you know, I'm going to be, you know, we're eternal. My relationship's eternal. Before I saw her, before we came down, I saw my daughter, and she knew she was going to go through all this, and I was going, "Oh my gosh, this is Mormonism 100%." But other people wouldn't understand it because they don't know the Mormonism language. But I saw that I was seeing it differently than the reporter was, simply because I knew the inside language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw that, and I just was like, whoa. Yeah, Cameron.
Yeah, funny that Landon goes to Lori Vallow because I was thinking of Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrand. But the comment I would make is that sometimes family systems can be cult-ish or cult-like as well.
Sure.
And I think when there's a lack of differentiation, when there's a like Ruby clearly was a cult leader even before Jody got involved in her family. She ruled that entire situation and manipulated her children and her husband. And I don't give her husband any credit. I actually am very critical of him too. But we just need to be careful. These things I think are human flaws that we have for being humans. I think Yuval Harari will talk about it probably in that book that we're going to read. I know he talked about it in *Sapiens*, but these are things that we've evolved to, to be, I guess, at risk for falling into these kinds of traps. And for me, the only way to try and stay out of these kinds of traps is critical thinking, examining our motivations, learning about biases, constantly reevaluating the evidence, and having a level of humility that will allow us to change our mind and not get like too caught up in what our leaders are telling us. Because we're always going to have leaders and we're always going to have hierarchies, and we just have to be careful about all this different stuff in my mind. So.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, Cameron. That was a good point. She points that out, actually, that as humans, we want to be in a tribe, right? We want to belong to a group. So and the critical thinking is the way we keep ourselves safe. It's when we give over our power of critical thinking to the leader that then we become in danger. Yeah. So true. Yeah, she points that out. Okay, so I'm gonna move beyond the language to some specific examples of different kinds of cults. I put an S here because I know that word is triggering to some people. So these are the cults that unalived themselves. And the red flags of a dangerous guru or a dangerous leader are things like, on the surface, they appear to be prophetic and revolutionary. Who would that be? I don't know. Joseph Smith, maybe? Okay. And underneath the surface, they are I always say this word wrong, maniacal, lying, paranoid narcissist. So I think that, yeah, there's really great, we can say that there were some good leaders and some bad leaders in our history. I think that, you look at Brigham Young and the ability he had to bring all those people to Utah and tell them where to settle and all that kind of good stuff. People just followed. And obviously Joseph Smith had a lot of these characteristics as well. So she said, how do people get involved in these dangerous situations? Just like Cameron was just bringing up, you have to be aware of what is happening so you can safeguard yourself. 3 things that cultish behavior does is it makes people feel special and understood. And this is where the love bombing comes in. This is called conversion. A different set of language tactics come into play second. After that is getting people to feel dependent on the leader. Life outside the group doesn't seem possible, or it's, you don't see yourself as not being part of that. This is a more gradual part of the process, and it's called conditioning. And then the last one is language convinces people to act in ways that are completely in conflict with their former reality, ethics, and sense of self. This is coercion. And I looked at this and I went, I served a mission in a very Catholic area. In fact, toward the end of my mission, the Pope was coming to visit, and now the Pope is Argentine. So I was in Argentina, and I thought, yeah, we love bombed our investigators. And then you get them into play, and you give them jobs. The first thing they said to do was, once they get baptized, give them a job, even if it's just like handing out the hymnals. I remember that. And then last but not least, you want to keep them there, right? So you got to figure out how you're going to keep them coming into the seats. And I just thought that this was really I could see that I had done this. And I think that when I look back, the biggest thing I had in my deconstruction was how guilty I feel, because so many of my baptisms in I didn't baptize them, but so many of the people that I taught and were converted have gone on and they're still in the church 40 years later. And some of them are bishops and stake presidents. And I'm like, and so most people, that would be a good thing. But to me, I think it's a bad thing. And it was really, I felt really guilty about that. So, but I saw this exactly in our missionary experience. And, I don't know if anybody else did, but for me, this really played into play, and I did it all in a second language. So, well, I studied that language. Yeah, Rebecca.
Yeah, I didn't serve a mission, but I have a currently serving missionary, and I have had another son that served a mission. And when I read through this list, I could take pretty much any of their letters, and as they describe what they're doing with the people that they're interacting with, and I'm sure they would not think of it this way, but Mom, we went over to Sister so-and-so's and we baked cookies, and we told her we this, or, we explained this principle to them. They pushed back, but we told them they needed to, everything in this list is what the missionaries are just routinely doing. And not just the missionaries. I like to go over on Faithful social media a lot, and especially some of the Reddit threads of Faithful LDS, and you'll have people write in quite often, I just barely joined your church. I'm confused about this. And they'll say something, a question they have about, something on this list here, like, I don't know, about giving up my coffee or paying some of my income. It's not just missionaries, it's the members then that they all jump on very lovingly. Oh, no, you just have to do this, and you'll feel so much better if you do this. And they just, they love bomb on any question or any issue that somebody who's newly a member of the church has. So, it's not just missionaries. They're the front line, right? They get them in, and then the members very lovingly. Everything is done very lovingly, but you're definitely doing these 3 steps here. I mean, if somebody loves their coffee in the morning, number 3 there, and they're being told, oh no, you can't anymore, you give up a little piece of yourself right there. There was a post the other day about, oh, I'm a young parent, I have little kids, I can't pay tithing, this is destroying me. There you go, coercion. I'm being asked to do something that's really against my best interest. Love the loving comments that poured in, assuring this person. So I think we all did that when we were members, and the missionaries are doing it right now. It works very well.
Good point. Yeah. Bruce.
I saw a couple of examples with my parents. My parents were devout Mormons, but they were never unkind. But they had friends, and it was in the environment around us, 2 groups that didn't end up taking lives necessarily, but it was the John Birch Society and the followers of Cleon Skousen. Oh. And I know my parents' friends, and I visited them. I took my mom until she was in her 80s to visit them in Provo, and they were just devoted Skousenites. And I can remember my father, saying, oh, so-and-so's a Bircher. But my parents kept a distance from them. They were devout Mormons, but they never got into that. And I always kind of give them a bit of credit, because they also never rejected non-believing family members. Like sometimes the church recommends that you disinherit your children and stuff. So I saw my parents have this kind of healthy boundary. I need a boundary further out, like it's been mentioned in some of the comments, like all groups, man, you need to look at every group. I mean, I still, for many years, haven't been in a political party because I just can't. Some of them are crazy, and some of them are just disorganized. And I'm going like, I'll give them money for what I think is right, but I'm still not putting my name in with them. Just my thought.
Yeah, and even worse now. Yeah, Landon.
Yeah, the slide is not showing that list again, but
I know I forwarded it and I can't go back. Sorry.
We do have in the church we have a name for that process, and it's called milk before meat. We always taught that, and that's exactly what that is. Don't tell them the weird stuff until they're ready. Don't tell them the stuff that they would, because if you tell them that right up front, they would reject it right away. And as I was reading the book, that was one of the things with Scientology. The lady said, if they talked about the UFOs coming and picked me up at the start, I never would have gone into this group.
Exactly.
But after years of study and time invested in other things, then you all of a sudden allow yourself to give away what you normally would not accept. And I know now that I'm out of the church, I look back and I say, how did I ever allow myself to get there? And it was that milk before meat. They just step you through and you accept each little piece one at a time till you get to the point where you're eating something you never would have bought into had they just told everything up front.
So true. And when you're born into it, you don't know the difference. It's just there. Cameron.
Hey, I'm going to continue to be a little bit of a pushbacker today
Good.
on some
Go
of this
for it.
so I've been joining a lot of different groups in the last year or so. I've just made it a personal goal. So I've joined like diversity and inclusion groups and running groups and political groups. And some of them have been very love bomby. And I want to say that that's sometimes a good thing. It makes me feel good when people remember my name and do special things and ask me to be involved in it more. I feel more committed to the group. I think that's natural. I think that's a good thing. We don't want to be isolated people that never commit to anything and are just living on our own somewhere. So I think there's kind of going to be degrees, like she says, in a spectrum. And I mentioned this in the comments earlier, but I think it would be helpful if maybe sometime during the discussion we could talk a little bit about healthy and unhealthy traits or behaviors that we want to encourage and foster the healthy ones and discourage the unhealthy ones. But I don't want to take the baby out of the bathwater. What is that saying? I mean, I don't want to throw the baby. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's some good stuff about feeling included in part of a group. I don't want to. That's part of being a good human, isn't it? So
Yeah. I think that maybe the difference comes in that third step of coercion. When you're doing something that's against your innate self, or again, you're giving up your critical thinking skills, you're doing something that doesn't feel natural to you, where you feel like you're just giving up that sense of self, that little bit of self. And if you're doing a group that's like makes you feel good, great. I belong to several groups myself, including this book club, right? So, but I don't feel coerced by it. So I'm not there. I think that's one of the big differences. Bruce.
Yeah, I think Cameron's point is really good. It's whether you can come and go into a group without severe consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't leave Mormonism in general because my family relationships have never recovered from me just being inactive. We didn't toss in being gay on top of that damaged it even more. But I belong to some groups that are it's free association.
Mm-hmm.
And we do love bomb, and I spend a fair amount of time volunteering. Karin here with us today is a member of a group that I belong to, and we give money and we give time, but you can come and go freely. And there's not the negative, but there is some of the positive there. So I agree with Cameron. Belonging to groups is good, but you've just got to, like Cameron, if your running group got to the point where they wanted to have sex with your wife and your daughter, that's where I would consider it becoming problematic.
JJ.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit more onto Cameron's thing. I don't see anything wrong with joining groups. A lot of people have things in common, the same interests. It is a community. One thing I do want to note with the church, if you join another church and they find out, you're officially out. And that kind of bothers me. I'm Armenian. And typically you're considered an Armenian when you're baptized at birth. My mother was a member. My father had nothing against the church. He would join it later on. But we went through that process with my brother and I. We were baptized in the Armenian church. We were 8. We were baptized in the Mormon church. Back then, this was the Middle East. We're a little different. We're a little exotic. We're not Utah people. I never moved to Utah until I was 18. So no one said anything about it. But these days, something happened in the mid-90s with the church. They got very militant. Oh, you drink coffee, have a meeting with the bishop. Oh, you joined another church. You're out. So just something there. I mean, your running group is not going to kick you out because you joined a CrossFit gym, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to point that part out.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. Again, I don't think that the author is saying all groups are bad. I didn't get that. I just, and she points out that we have a tendency to want to belong to groups, unless I guess you're some hermit that wants to live in the woods by yourself. But most of us want to be with other people. That's just in our instinctual behaviors. That's just part of who we are as human beings. There's safety in groups, right? But it's all in the exit strategy. She points out at some point how you can get out, or like Bruce said, how you can come and go. Landon.
I wrote down here, it seems that, the way to keep a group or to make sure a group isn't a cult is does it allow checks and balances of the leadership and its core missions? And if you can, and if people can challenge it, and if members can question it and say, that doesn't sound right, and the group can change based on the consensus of its member groups, then I don't see anything wrong with a group when it has checks and balances within it. It's when it allows complete control and manipulation by the upper leadership. And unfortunately, we've seen that over and over with the church, that if you challenge something with them, you're out. You're not allowed, and you can't question. Why is there no transparency? Why are you not listening to members' concerns? Why is everything top down and not bottom up? And it seems like if there's checks and balances, you kind of avoid the whole cult issue.
That's a good point. I like that. All right. So some other elements of cultish language. Now, remember, I don't think we're talking all groups. I think we're just talking the most extreme here. When in the language, they create an us versus them. We have all the answers. The rest of the world is inferior. We have the truth, and we need to spread it with everybody else. The insider language inspires a sense of intrigue. It fosters camaraderie. You look down on others who aren't privy to the code, like, oh, I don't know, you haven't been to the temple. It feels fun and sacred to the committed members. They really like it. And the followers leave behind their old vocabulary and enthusiasm. I think that's true to an extent. I saw that with the converts I looked at in Argentina. They're just some things you stop saying. This one is interesting. Potential troublemakers show themselves easily by not using the vocabulary. It's an identifier. Whoa, I think that's so true. It's kind of like the Lori Vallow interview that Landon was talking about. It's like some things were just key to those of us who could see it. I remember my family took me for my 50th birthday to go see the Book of Mormon, and we were just cracking up. We were laughing so hard, and we were getting things in the Book of Mormon that other people weren't understanding because it went deeper, right? And the people in front of us at intermission turned around and said, you guys must be Mormon because you are laughing at things we're not. So, the language, definitely an identifier. Even being from Utah, some things I used it differently than my wife, who's from California. New names isolate members from the outside. Outsiders get inflammatory nicknames too. I thought of the whole thing about calling everybody who wasn't, we used to do this a lot, everyone who wasn't Mormon a Gentile, which labels Jewish people as Gentiles, which is like crazy. I think I heard the statement once that the only place where Jewish people are Gentiles is in the Mormon church. And also apostate, oof, that's a bad one, an apostate. So those were just some of the elements. I think that we can see that everywhere. Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a Jewish friend here. Karen's on, she knows her. It's Eunice Schatz. She was the dean of the School of Social Work at the University of Utah for 8 years. And she's Jewish. She was the dean at a East Coast university. And when she got to Utah, they tried to convert her. And they said, you can be with your family forever. And she goes, I divorced my husband and I'm not that close to my kids for a reason. And then they explained to her how she was a Gentile. And if she became Mormon, she would not be a Gentile anymore. And she goes, well, I was Jewish my whole life. I kind of like being Gentile. That's kind of a new thing for me. She has the most charming stories about the 8 years that she was the dean at the University of Utah School of Social Work. She's her wife are friends of mine. And yeah, that whole redefining the term Gentile.
Yeah.
It's part of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay. Do any of those things sound familiar? All right, we're almost done with this one. So the linguistic tools, and I can't remember who brought up the one we're going to look at. When the nicknames and insider terminology, sorry guys, I'm having a little bit of trouble, acquire a strong emotional charge, that's loaded language. When the mere mention of a word or phrase can spark fear, grief, dread, jubilation, or reverence, that's loaded language. And loaded language can be used to steer followers' behaviors. I think that, like, apostate, that is a word that would strike fear into the heart of any true believing Mormon, right? Nobody wants to be labeled an apostate. So it's just kind of things like that. And there's a lot of words that spark dread, jubilation, or reverence. I think in Mormonism, I tend to forget them because I don't like a lot of those feelings getting into my mind. Sometimes it works by twisting the meaning of existing words until the new one overtakes the old one, and sometimes it comes in the form of misleading euphemisms. Like doubt your doubts, what the heck is in loaded language is a cue to intensify emotion to the follower. So it's like, now you're going to feel the spirit, right? Feel the spirit. That's a cue. You want to get that high emotional feeling and just kind of go from there. So going along with the loaded language, the other linguistic tool that's used are these semantic stop signs, thought terminating cliches. They are catchphrases that are intended to stop an argument from moving forward and to discount critical thinking. They are used to quickly get rid of dissent or to rationalize flawed thought. Okay, so they put the follower in their place. Yeah, they are used to squash independence and independent thought. They are stock sayings used by everybody over and over and over again. Used together, loaded language and semantic stop signs are coercion. These sayings are effective because they alleviate cognitive dissonance, which is the uncomfortable feeling one has when they hold two conflicting beliefs at the same time. All right, I know all groups are going to use these. I know that, but it's when we use them together with deliberate intention, or maybe not so deliberate on a lot of people's parts, that it becomes not a good thing. Bruce.
Yeah, just bringing up, I've had family members throw around anti-Mormon literature.
Oh, yeah.
You know, going like, okay, no, let's just talk about something that's true or not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they end up anti-Mormon, but yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, that's one of those. That was classic overall. And I think that there's a lot of, if people actually stopped and thought, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance that goes on in religion. And so these things help keep us in where we're at. So I like this, that brainwashing doesn't really exist. It's a metaphor. It isn't real. Language does not work to manipulate people into believing things they don't want to believe. Instead, it gives them license to believe ideas they already believe, basically. So I thought that was interesting because we throw around brainwashing all the time. So it's not really brainwashing. It's just like you're given the permission to go ahead with what you believed already. Confirmation bias. This is an ingrained human flaw. People look for the things they find. They interpret, accept, and remember information that strengthens our own beliefs while ignoring or dismissing anything that goes against them. So a lot of this would be like feeling the spirit would be a confirmation. I think it would be a confirmation bias because you're looking for something like that. Cultish leaders use confirmation bias to present a one-sided view of information that only presents their view and what their followers want to hear. Now, when you get peer pressure combined with confirmation bias, things become harder to resist. That's true. So what do you think of this idea? We have been conditioned to automatically trust the voice of the middle-aged white man. We perceive that he sounds like, quote unquote, the voice of God. When a white man speaks confidently in public, many people are likely to default the pitch, the standard English, and people trust them without questioning. Oh, dang it. I don't know how to go back. Sorry. So I just want, what do we think of that idea that we are conditioned to trust this middle-aged white man's voice? Anybody have any thoughts on that? If not, we'll move on. I'm okay with not having thoughts. So I think, I don't know how much more time I have because this was a lot. I just want to go religious speech. These cause things to happen in a way that are extremely profound to the believer. Talking to a spiritual entity like having prayer over and over again will eventually lead the believer to feel like the entity is speaking back to them. You get personal stuff. This leads the believer to think that the ideas, solutions, etc. that pop into their mind during this time are of divine origin. And what are they encouraged to do? And in most religions, pray over and over and over again. Ritual time, in order to maintain the power of religious language, it must be limited to something symbolic that has a start and an end. And this, I also come into where Cameron's saying all groups are like, have some aspects. If the ritual time stays within the ritual time and doesn't like bleed over into your everyday life, then and you have the power to leave it there, then that's good. It's basically a good group. But if the ritual time language goes like over into all of your life and you can't separate it, that's when it becomes more of a red flag that's kind of how I understood it. An oppressive group does not let you leave ritual time. You're constantly in it 24/7. Remember that Scientology, she talked about this. It has no power without its cultish language. Scientology holds a slew of copyrights and is extremely litigious. It likes to ease you in. The vernacular is introduced bit by bit. Has acronyms work to confuse people in obscure meaning. It has jargon where people tend to comply more when they feel confused and not as smart as everyone else. It also has an element of bamboozlement. When people are in a state of bamboozlement, only the authority figures to know what is true and what they need to do. They tell them. They defer to the authority figures. And in what ways does Mormonism do the same thing? Well, I think there's a lot of this. I know a friend got a letter from the headquarters years ago because he was using the same font for something for affirmation that the church used. And they were like, we're going to, we'll take you to court if you don't do this. We talked about the easing you in. We have acronyms up the wazoo, MTC, RM, et cetera, et cetera. So jargon, yeah, days of 47, the pioneers. I mean, we could go on and on. So anyway, Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah, I was doing an introduction a few years ago with my social group that Karin and Jeff and different people belong to. It's kind of a non-religious social group here in Pasadena. And I was explaining that I grew up in a high demand religion. And this one woman who was a social worker goes, well, how do we deal with people who want to join our group from high demand religions? And I said, basically, you never have to worry about that because Mormons, Scientologists, Jehovah's Witnesses are never going to let their people join outside groups. They make their schedule so completely overwhelming that you don't have time to be in social clubs like Rotary, Kiwanis, Optimus, all these things. High demand religions don't give you enough time to have life outside the high demand religion. At least that was my observation.
Yeah, I think that's true. All right. So then they also pointed out these two ideas of gaslighting and glossolalia. I think that's how you say it. I don't know. Someone can help me out. So remember, we all know gaslighting has become such a popular term. It's a deliberate undermining of the truth. So followers will come to depend wholly on the leader for what to believe. And glossolalia, speaking in tongues, its primary goal is group solidarity. The person is demonstrating that they are part of the group. It promotes a greater intensity of faith, especially if it happens after intense personal trauma. Can be a potent conversion event. All right, I was always thought, okay, we don't have speaking in tongues in the Mormon church. And then I went, back up, Jackie. What about fast and testimony meeting? And I think that fast and testimony meeting is an example of this. Okay, granted, they're not speaking in like a different language or different sounds, but the primary goal of fast and testimony meeting is a group solidarity. And most people do bear their testimonies after an intense personal trauma, especially, you know, those vacation traumas that they have. And bearing your testimony can be a potent conversion event. As missionaries, that was what we were supposed to do all the time because it brought in, you know, the spirit. So I think that I don't know, I kind of broadened my definition of speaking in tongues. I don't know if anybody else agrees with that, but that's kind of where I was with the speaking in tongues thing. I looked at it as like, oh, we're getting up in front of the group, you know, everybody's listening to us, and we're testifying. Yeah, go ahead, Cameron.
Yeah, I just on the glossolalia, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right either. That's something some Christian churches like the Pentecostals still do a lot nowadays. But I think specifically that's just talking about saying gibberish words going into I don't think it's a trance-like state, but it's some kind of a state where, you know, there's part of your brain, probably the more primitive part of your brain, like the amygdala, that's firing. And I've heard people that have done this and can do it on demand, basically. Some of them that have deconstructed from the religion and can still do it. So that's how early Mormonism defined speaking in tongues too. It's just we've changed the definition now to say, oh, it just means learning a new language when you're a missionary, but that's not what it originally meant. So
no, yeah, I agree. That is it. Usually, its primary definition. I was just kind of like, I don't know, it was a little bit of a dawning factor on me that maybe it could apply here, or maybe not. Dana, go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. So that's something that I just did a deep dive in when I was looking at polygamy. And I was surprised that glossolalia was really used so often in the Mormon church, in the early church. And it was very well documented in all of the journals. But I think part of what I'm understanding of the cultish behavior is we've all but erased it now in Mormon culture. I would have thought, oh, that's so crazy, you know, because you can just look it up on YouTube. And I thought, oh, that's so crazy. You know, we don't have anything like that. It's the speaking of tongues is talking about missionaries learning a language. And then to find out that really, yes, the Mormon church did have a big part in that. That was a surprise to me, but I think that's kind of going into that cultish behavior where they did have it originally, but then as a collective group, we've had to sort of say, oh no, people who do that, well, that's crazy. We don't do that.
Yeah, because we don't look at it as a good thing, do we? And most people don't, right? Okay, good. Anyone else? All right. Okay. And if you've never felt like somebody was gaslighting you, I'm happy for you. So here's where we come. When experimenting with faith and belief, especially, there must be space to ask questions, to express your misgivings, and to seek outside information. This needs to happen both early on and deep into membership. Well, I think number 3, I mean, I don't know. These can all be, depending on the answers. If something is legitimate, it will stand up to scrutiny. Yeah, true. And they will want you to scrutinize it. So like, okay, so Cameron, your running group, you can have 10 pairs of shoes because you have a different reason for wearing all those shoes, right? You're going to run in this weather or that weather. I have 2 pairs of hiking boots. I have my hiking boots when I'm going on a tough trail that has more ankle support. And I have those are my Merrells, and I have my Hokas when I'm on a more gravelly, less don't need as much ankle support. I get it. You know, I grew up dancing. I had 10 million pairs of dance shoes, right? Depending on what I was doing. So, but that's okay. So you're asking questions, well, which is this and that, but they're not trying to keep you from doing that. So, or having those experiences. And I think that it stands up to scrutiny. I think that some of the questions we might ask ourselves now about certain groups would not stand up to scrutiny. And that's just kind of where I'm at about that. So remember, you can jump in anytime. All right. I'm going to see if I can get through this quickly. Multi-level marketing, MLMs. They use words such as once in a lifetime opportunity, boss babe, start your own business, make a full-time income working part-time from home, financial independence. They are a pay and recruit. So you pay something and then you recruit the people under you. Your upline are the people above you, your downline are the people underneath you, and then the affiliates. They often call it a purchase of hope, those starter kits. They're just amazing, $50 to $10,000 or more of stuff you have to sell to get, to make your money. So it's just, my parents went to a meeting for a pyramid scheme in the 70s, and I'm not seeing much difference, although there is a difference between pyramid schemes and MLMs. 99% of MLM recruits never make a dime. 99%. So it's just crazy. So how does this apply? All right, Latter-day Saints are born and bred to be missionaries. So preaching the gospel to friends often naturally flows with selling MLM products to their friends. Yeah, we're really good at selling stuff. All right. We're not afraid to get up in front of a group and present. We're not afraid to ask people for things, fast offerings and all that kind of good stuff. Utah is home to more MLM headquarters than anywhere else in the world. Okay. And I already knew that. Most of us already knew that. The industry takes advantage of the trust that already exists in tight-knit communities or groups. A typical MLM recruit is a stay-at-home mom and wife striving for financial independence. Now we're beginning to see all these things combined to make Utah the home to more MLM headquarters than anywhere else in the world. And the people working in the headquarters are getting the paychecks, right? It's the affiliates out in the field that had to pay that aren't making the money. So, and it's the people at the top that are making all the money, that lovely 1%. So, I always knew that Utah was home to this, and that Utah had a tendency to be taken advantage of or be the scam capital of the world as well. And we're just very trusting too. We tend to trust people. Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah, I was at BYU in the late 70s, early 80s, and a business major, and they talked so negatively about MLMs. I went to a conference when they did a demonstration of a Ponzi scheme, and it was just the most outrageous thing. And they pointed out that this actually happened. And now when I see things like New Skin and different people advertising and giving money to BYU, the tune changed from when I was there in the late 70s, early 80s, because in my classes, we openly discussed multi-level marketing as a very bad thing. And, a little money, washed it clean.
Yeah. It's amazing to me, like when I'm driving from Southern California to Salt Lake City, and I get into Utah County, and all of a sudden there's like Herbalife and what's that like Polynesian juice and Young Life, and it's just like it hits me in Utah County, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'm home. So yeah, Cameron.
Yeah, sorry to keep commenting, but I worked for Tahitian Noni Juice. That's the one you're thinking
That's
of
the one I'm thinking
for
of,
like
exactly.
5 years while I was in college. In the corporate office, I wasn't involved in selling the product, but it's interesting to see when you work in the inner workings of these companies. A lot of the people that are like the biggest distributors and stuff, they just go from one MLM to another, so they start a new one. And then as long as you're one of the top early people in the top of the pyramid, you're the one that's making money. So they just go from the next to the next to the next. And like you said, 99% of people don't make any money. So, unfortunately, we had Orrin Hatch in Utah that got a law passed back in the 90s that protected MLM so that the FDA can't, regulate them. Well, all the herbal product companies, FDA can't regulate any herbal products. So it's just kind of weird that we've set up this whole thing in Utah, and it's very unfortunate. So,
yeah. Landon.
Isn't this the church's business plan? It sure seems like it to me. You go out and you recruit people and you have a lot of kids and have them under you, and you reach the top by having more kids, and nobody makes money at the bottom. It's only the people at the top who really have any power or influence, and everyone else is just there thinking that they're on the right path, and in the end, they don't really have to deliver anything to you. They just have to make you think that you're moving up towards the top of the peak.
That's a really good thought. I hadn't thought about that, but we do sit it with a prophet and then the 12 underneath him, and it is definitely hierarchical.
Yeah.
The people at the bottom have no power, right? Or no say in anything except raise your arm to the square, right? So
and the other thing that you mentioned here to me that is this stay-at-home mom, because the church emphasized this so strongly that you work from home. And so what option do women have is they're trying to find a way to help contribute to the family. And meantime, they're giving away 10% of their income that they're making from their husband, but they're trying to contribute so much to the family. They want to contribute. The women want to contribute financially. And this is a pathway for them to feel like they can contribute financially while still staying at the home. And I think that's one of the reasons they're so popular here in Utah, is because the women can stay at home and think and try to contribute financially.
That's so true. So true. Bruce.
Yeah, and I get this from Reddit because I'm very disconnected from the church. But my understanding is the head of the Relief Society now had a 30-year corporate lawyer career before she became head of the Relief Society. She didn't take any of the advice to be a stay-at-home mom. She was a corporate lawyer for 30 years, and now she's the woman at the head. I thought that was kind of an interesting.
That is really interesting, because I'm of the generation where they were all, 70s, 80s. I went to college in the 80s. It was all stay at home, stay at home, stay at home. Or if you went to college, you went to get married, right? Not necessarily to finish your degree. And so there were a lot of us in my generation that feel like we didn't get, I'm fine, but I've heard this from other people in red. They feel like they didn't get to actually do what they wanted to do because they took the advice to be a stay-at-home mom. And maybe so. I mean, I'm sure that led to a lot of people, doing stuff like this, but yeah. Okay. So MLMs. Ugh. Oh, and then I thought this was interesting. Happy people are more gullible. And who's more happy than the Mormons, right? We are proud of ourselves for being happy people. We pride ourselves for being happy. All right. So then the fitness aspect came in, and a lot of us will go, "Ooh, maybe this applies to me." In the early 2010s, cult fitness exploded to fill in the gaps of adults' lack in trust and mainstream medicine and young people's disillusion with traditional religion. In the mid-2010s, the phrase cult fitness entered the scene. And like church, fitness brands became a social identity and a code by which to lead your life. Interesting. A place where people put down their devices and made connections. Cult fitness primarily caters to and appeals to urban dwelling millennials with income to spare, the same group that has renounced traditional religion. Cult workout language tends to be ritualistic. I cannot vouch for this. I am not a cult workout person. Tends to be ritualistic and rarefied because it is good for business. But followers are free to leave at the end of a workout and start talking like themselves again, which is a whole different than being totally immersed. So your ritual time is while you're doing your fitness, not while you're doing your fitness. And I mean, it can invade in it. I get it. Because, I could talk about all things hiking for a long time, but it's not like, but that is also part of me. I chose that, right? It wasn't chosen for me. So it's just a different way to look at it. Yeah, Landon.
This is where she kind of started to lose me. Because I don't know, I don't see fitness doing fitness as being a cult. And maybe, obviously I don't spend a lot of time at the CrossFit gym, but I know people who do CrossFit. I've never seen anything strange about it. Same thing with even MLMs. I see people, like I say, I see that they like to recruit from groups that are cultish, but again, I don't know that I refer to that as a cult either. I thought that maybe she was going a little too far with the term cult, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe other people have had experiences with this. I just thought she was going maybe too far on some of these.
I hear you. I think she was trying to point out the language aspects of it, because that's mostly what the book is about, the linguistic roots of it all. But yeah, this was pretty interesting to me that she would do this. JJ.
I did CrossFit for a little while very early on. And at first I did kind of like it, but CrossFit does have a sort of culture with it. Greg Glassman, a little bit is mentioned about him in the book. He's the guy that started it. He was very libertarian, very political. But at the time, most people didn't know it until you got to a CrossFit gym. And all of a sudden, everybody I was around was very libertarian. And I was thinking, is this who you really are? Is this what you really think? He also had a very good reputation until halfway during COVID, after George Floyd died. He made a couple of jokes about it. There was a CrossFit gym not far from him in Minneapolis that wanted to be a part of the community and said, well, in the spirit of CrossFit and the spirit of the people, let's just get involved with this. He just criticized them to where these guys, they put the note that he sent them online, people saw it, and then he doubled down on it. It's like, guys, a guy just got killed and here you are making fun of him, and then you keep on making fun of him. And that kind of destroyed the name CrossFit. I don't know if you've noticed that. Mm-hmm. He stepped down, another guy took over. And no one brags about Greg Glassman anymore, but I remember back then a lot of people would follow someone just because he's, I guess, their dear leader kind of thing. Mm-hmm. The other aspect of gyms that I did not like, in soft cultures, I guess they use the term soft culture, soft cult. I mean, you're free to leave anytime. You don't want to go to a concert, it's not a big deal. You missed your Linux group, not a big deal. You don't go running with the group. No one's going to call you up and say, where were you? But with the gyms, at one point, and I don't know if they still do it, they make you sign a contract, and it's impossible to get out of. And that was one thing a lot of people did not like about that. And Utah was very bad at that. They'd almost get political and attorney-wise. It's like, well, here's your contract, and they'd give you read your contract thing. And it's like, I had to explain to people, I'm in Los Angeles. I don't live in Salt Lake City. And they're like, well, read your contract. And it's like, I did read my contract. I do not live anywhere near the gym, Yeah. And they had a hard time with that. It took a lot to get out of it, which I was thinking, wait a sec, what's this all about? What are you trying to do here? Anyway, that's my little 2 cents there.
Okay, I think that, that's an experience I've never heard of. I mean, I know you do have to sign a contract with some gyms. I think they're more month to month around here now, but yeah, you're right. And I did read that about the CrossFit. So I like that term soft cult or, soft culture, because that is that whole point of being able to come and go as you want to. Nobody's going to really call you out too much. Oops, I got something in the way here. Sorry, I'm trying to. Okay. Is the group, so we want to look at these questions when we're looking at to see if your fitness group is cultish. Is the group genuinely welcoming of all different people? I think we can apply this to other groups as well. Is there excessive pressure to dress and talk like everyone else, even outside of class? Are people allowed to participate casually, or is it a force? You got to, you have to go further or harder than you can, and kill yourself basically. Or do people have to put all their time and faith in this group alone, basing all their decisions on the groups? again, I think this goes beyond fitness. Do people trust the leader to let them follow their own body? In other words, what they can do, or do they push it beyond limits? And I think that there's a lot of groups that I could like ask these questions of. Almost, they mentioned the hundreds of dollars that people spend on workout gear to look a certain way to go to the gym, right? Or on your hydro flasks or whatever. You have to have the certain, water bottle to go to certain places. So this is kind of just I think we can ask these questions of all the groups that we belong to and see how the answers go. And the big one is, what is the exit cost? So can I get out easily and not like feel like I've left all my world behind, or do I feel like I left everything I own, back there? So I think that is a big key for all the groups that we belong to. What is the exit cost? So then we got to social media, which I think was another thing that, we could say, is it a cult or not? We could say it's cultish. But I like that she calls this the ultimate pseudo church to which billions of us belong is social media. Our social media posts make us feel more connected and important. The algorithm, she even capitalized it. I like it. I talk about the algorithm all the time. My wife will say, did you see that on Facebook? And I say, no, because the algorithm doesn't show me the same things it shows you. No cult leader takes advantage of our psychological drives quite like the algorithm, which thrives on sending us down rabbit holes so we never come across rhetoric we don't agree with unless we are actively searching for it. So again, we can see if this is if we want to call this a cult or not, but it kind of has some ways of it. Bruce.
Yeah, I just bring up, and for newer members, you can go back in our YouTube channel and our book, The Chaos Machine, that we read a few months ago. And they attributed part of the genocide in Myanmar to Facebook.
Yep. The
algorithm pushed everybody to be very polarized, and it ended up in a lot of deaths and stuff. And yeah, I struggle with social media. I'm not watching the news very much. So then I hang around Reddit a little more than I should. It's hard to figure out how I'm not feeling good about watching news right now. And so I'm watching more movies.
That's probably smart. Super smart. Super smart. Okay, Cameron.
Yeah, so I do think this is a big concern, especially in our modern world that we're bombarded with so much information. But I think echo chambers and getting in an echo chamber or a bubble of thinking where you're not exposed to different ways of thinking, it can be really problematic. And in the post-Mormon slash, even nuanced Mormon world, I keep running into people that are getting in groups that kind of challenge me a little bit, like maybe the Michelle Stone polygamy denying Joseph Smith thing. And if anyone in here is in that group, don't think I'm judging you negatively. I'm just saying it challenges the way I look at things. Or Brigham Young conspired to kill Joseph Smith. Those kinds of groups. I just was talking to someone yesterday in my ward who disclosed a bunch of this stuff to me because he knows I give like really weird answers to questions in the ward. But I think there are some challenges with respect to these echo chambers, and I don't know how to fix it. I want to say we need to love all these people, no matter what group they're in, because we're all a part of a different group that probably has, fallacious ways of thinking within our group, and we need to constantly be re-examining ourselves, like I mentioned earlier. But yeah, I'm a little bit worried about how technology is driving some of this stuff in our modern day. It's very concerning.
Yeah, I agree. Landon.
Yeah, that's a good point because we struggle with that, with doing Mormonish. For instance, Michelle Stone wants to come on our show, and we're going, okay, we don't want to give credence to a belief that we don't agree with, that we feel is kind of ridiculous. But on the other hand, if you don't allow other voices, are you just an echo chamber? So you have to sit there and struggle with that. And you know you're going to get criticized if you let her come on. You know you're going to be criticized if you don't, and you kind of have to make your best choice. So I agree. I can see where this, it can be tough because you don't want to be stuck in an echo chamber. You do want to see, getting out of the Mormon church and just going into a different echo chamber doesn't do you any good. You need to be open to all ideas and be able to have a critical discussion on things. But then you kind of have to say what's crazy versus what's normal and try to make some judgment calls on some of that. So
true. Yeah. Okay. What in the world? The cult of social media attention works because influencers are pushed by the apps. Sorry, all the influencers on here. When their posts are on trend and hyper engaging. Spiritual influencers, which exist in the internet world. I don't know what I wanted. These spiritual gurus are often pushed by whatever the zeitgeist wants, and it's hard to really know what their personal beliefs are. They take a backseat to the clicks. So I just see this with young people. I'm not even talking spiritual, but having taught high school for all these years, how it's so different when I retired versus when I started in the 80s, and when I retired in 2021. These influencers have so much power over these kids. And over the world in general. The rise of conspiracy theories, the rhetoric overlaps with that of conservative wellness fear. Before QAnon, the appearance of the idea of conspirituality, which is conspiracy and spirituality to describe the political spiritual movement. QAnon's allure is the promise of knowledge only followers have. And again, the vocabulary is changing. Code words, hashtags, acronyms, loaded language, keyboard symbols, in an attempt to keep in front of the ability to flag language and accommodate new beliefs. So now don't we only have in real life cults, but we also have online cults. And I think that QAnon might be one of those that we could all maybe, I don't know if we all agree, but it's a pretty scary place for me. Chuck.
Sorry. I just wanted to comment on what Landon just said about having Michelle Stone on, for example.
Okay.
He said, what's normal and what's crazy. And I think in something like that, where we're dealing with facts, I think you just have to do your research and find out what is factual. I don't think we're under any obligation to have somebody espouse their views if they're obviously telling things that are not factual. And if it's difficult to determine what is factual, then I guess maybe that does get you into a gray area. But I think if you decide not to have someone like that on because they are telling things that are absolutely contrary to known fact or to established fact or to reliable sources, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think we're under any obligation to allow people to spread lies. This whole issue makes me think, as I've left the church, this whole issue makes me think about the broader issue of belief systems. It's not just religious, but there are so many things in our lives that we don't experience personally, and we know they're true because someone's told us they're true. And so over time, we have invested into that to such a degree that we don't want to ever lose that investment, so we tend to gravitate toward that. But so many things in our lives we know because we believe them, because we've been told them, because it's not possible in our lives to really experience everything personally. And so I just think that whole idea of belief and that whole idea of when you can find facts to find them and promote people that have factual information, I think to me that's an important thing.
I like that. I think that somehow I have a feeling in my feeling that promote facts and do facts kind of goes with the whole QAnon thing, because there's so much conspiracy that's not fact-based, but then so many people in today's day and age with the internet are willing to believe whatever they hear or whatever they read, and they don't do a lot of research. That I just kind of have a sense that all of this is related. So, but you're right.
Yeah, and that's the other side of that is, because they do start gaining all of these followers, and then sometimes though you have to say, do I have them on to say, no, you're wrong?
Right.
And try to turn the tide of why are so many people believing her, so it's kind of a two-edged sword.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was when I was in college, I took teaching English as a second language, and one of the things they taught us was if you start to learn a second language, or after you're 5 years old, your brain learns it as a second language. If you learn it before then, you can learn multiple languages much more easily. And I think somehow our brain makes that investment in that original language to where learning a second language is a whole different process and a more difficult process. We've made that investment. So if you think, well, why don't I just go out and learn Chinese? It's too much of an investment, right? And I think that's true of our belief systems. We build this whole structure of what's real in the world, and we're not really willing to challenge that because either we don't have time or it's too much effort or whatever. And so it's easy to be duped if we don't recognize that so much of what we think we know about the world is belief, and being open to different ways of thinking, or at least considering those, I think becomes very healthy.
That's critical thinking right there.
Right.
And so many people they leave that behind. I've found that, and unfortunately, because I was a teacher in high school, I taught Spanish, and now I teach adult CSL. So I right there. So unfortunately, I see such a difference in how people research and what they think since the appearance of the internet and all of its accessibility, that it's crazy. I mean, it was just been a totally different change I swear the kids in the 80s had more critical thinking skills than the kids do now in 2025, but the kids in 2025 have different sets of skills than the kids in the 1980s did. So, I mean, it's a balancing act for sure.
Well, I think social media does convince us that we're right? The algorithms are designed to do that.
It's the
So
algorithm again. Yeah.
maybe obviates the need for critical thinking skills, because if kids are on social media all the time, they know they're right.
Yeah. Because it just feeds their opinion, like you said, their belief system.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what she was pointing out about QAnon. It feeds that belief system. The more you dig into it, the more it's going to feed it. That's all you're going to find. Which is, the more you dig into Mormonism, it kind of goes the opposite way, has been my experience. The more you dig in it, and the more you want out.
Yes, I found that path, when you start questioning, it only leads one direction.
Exactly. So the question then becomes, now what? Well, here's, I think, a good thing for us to believe, that it comes from page 283. Above all else, it's important to maintain a vigilant twinkle in your eye, that tingle in your brain that tells you there's some degree of metaphor and make-believe here, and that your identity comes not from one swami or single-minded ideology, but from the vast amalgam of influences, experiences, and language that make up who you are. And so these pictures just kind of make up who I am. And I just want us all to keep that in mind. I liked that as my ending thought for all of you today. That's it.
Yay, such a good job covering that topic. I mean, there was a lot to it. It was really good. Everybody give her a little round of applause. That was amazing, Jackie. I love it. And so these pictures represent things that you care about and that you're a part of. I love it.
Yeah.
It's great.
So I love to travel. And in fact, I'd spend my whole life doing that. I'm an avid reader. I hike on the mountains of Utah. There's no better place to hike than there. It also reminds me of where I went every summer as a Girl Scout to Camp Cloud Rim above Park City. I'm a teacher, have been for well over 30 years, part of the LGBTQ Mormon community. And the last but not least, I like the beach. I love to go snorkeling and go to the ocean. So, yeah.
I love it. I think that's great. I think when you put something like that together, it's like a vision board kind of, and then it kind of helps you figure out who you are. I really like that a lot. So does anybody have any final thoughts or takeaways from the book that they would just like to share that they haven't had a chance to share in the chat, or, just talking?
I would
go
like
ahead, Karen.
Yeah. I can't see to use the little hand that goes up.
Oh no.
Just shout out whenever you want to talk.
Yes, loved this book. And I erroneously told Bruce this morning I used to sell Avon. It wasn't Avon, it was Tupperware.
Oh.
And I, honest to God, I didn't know anything about cults, but I remember going to their sales meetings and thinking, this is weirder than shit. What am I doing here? And so anyway, it was interesting to look back in the early 70s when I was a single mom trying to add a little bit more to the my income, and I got into Tupperware. Tupperware is a good product, but oh my God, the sales meetings were strange.
They don't
all
make
those
it
all
anymore.
those
Yeah.
Do you guys remember Amway at all?
Oh,
I was
yeah.
never
God,
in
yes.
Amway,
Yes,
but
Amway.
in the 80s and 90s, that was just
That's
so
a big one.
huge. And I remember one time I was newly married and somebody in our ward sold Amway. He was somebody in the Elders Quorum presidency, and he asked to come over. He gave us the pitch. We didn't even really know that that's why he wanted to come over, because we thought it was, well, there's two cults there, right? We thought he was coming over the capacity of the Elders Quorum. So we had to let him in, but we just kind of shut him down and said, thank you. But hours later, this was in the afternoon on a Sunday, hours later, he came back. Like at night, I want to say it was like 10 o'clock. It was dark outside. And we just heard this knock on our door, and we're like, hi. And he goes, you know what? I am just so impressed to come back. You guys need this. I mean, he wanted to do the double pitch. Yeah.
He really pulled a whammy. Yeah.
Exactly. The double whammy. He had a impression from God that we needed Amway.
Holy cow.
We were able to shut the door on that pretty quickly. But I think whoever made the point before that, cults seek out people that are already kind of in a cult-like environment to use them like that. But are you guys familiar with New Skin at all? Do you remember that back? So I feel like I think I had the opportunity to be on the absolute ground floor, but I didn't do it. So it was early 80s, and there was this very creepy guy in my ward, and I saw him on campus at BYU, and he was running very quickly. He goes, hey, I'm going to this meeting. It's this new thing. It's starting up. It's these products. It's in this woman's house, and let's all go. And it was, what's her name? The founder of New Skin, when they were still meeting out of her house. But because the guy kind of creeped me out, I said, no, thank you. So I always wonder if some, quantum string out
there. You could have been rich.
I was in on the very first meeting of New Skin, and maybe
that would have been the time to make
but
money.
yeah,
some of those have good products,
Exactly.
Avon, New Skin,
Melaleuca, I like
they
Terra.
have good products.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're into essential oils, doTERRA is nice. I mean, when my wife was first diagnosed with stage 4 uterine cancer way back when, there was a teacher at school, and everybody knows she's way into doTERRA. And she was like, oh, you need this one and this one. But she gave me samples, so I never had to buy any. But yeah, I mean, and Scentsy, was that also an MLM?
Yeah, I think so, with the candles and all that. Yeah, everybody.
Internet sales is kind of killing. I think internet selling is starting to kill the MLMs off because people can just get on and order off an internet rather than have a party and everything. So.
Right.
Yeah, I think so too. But back in the day, it's what all the, LDS moms, exactly what you said before. You're told to stay home, yet you have the brain of a CEO. So what do? You
become a boss babe
in something like that.
Boss babe.
You have to be a boss babe.
One, right?
That's right. Everybody's a boss babe. Why do you think Relief Society? I mean, all those women in Relief Society and young women, they need to be out CEOing in a company somewhere, not doing it for the church.
Well, in church, they honestly teach you how to do that, but then they squash it.
Then they squash it. Yep, that's exactly right. So JJ, everybody wants to comment. Yeah, go ahead, JJ and Cameron.
Just something to note. I went to a few Amway setups back in the early 90s, mid 90s. And I mean, the guy did a good job of convincing me. And then he got me to go to a seminar and rally. And that was the biggest turnoff. I mean, it was weird how they believed in it as though it was a church. It was from God, and they had their own sing-along stuff going on and everything. I'm like thinking, let me get the hell out of here. That's what saved me from it, was those guys. And I'm around all these people that are going on about how wonderful it is. And, this guy's a rhino. And, that goes back to the language that they have and the 90-day wonder and things like that. And so, that's... maybe sometimes you just have to go there and listen to what they're saying and then realize what it is.
It's a very good point. Knowledge is power. That's it.
Go ahead, Cameron. Just jump
if you heard about the spaceships up front, you would probably not become a Scientologist.
Exactly. They sent you to Raleigh too soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Milk before meat. Yes.
One thing I learned from Tupperware is, by God, I know how to burp a bowl.
I remember that. Oh my gosh.
Yep, I still do that.
I got Tupperware way back when I was like 16. So that's a long time ago now, for my hopeless chest, right? My mother was way big on that. And And I'm still using that Tupperware. Yeah, it's indestructible. They don't make it anymore.
Yeah. And
Cameron,
the
just
colors
jump
were
on
great,
in.
right? Olive and orange and
Yeah, the colors were
wonderful.
awesome.
Did you have a comment, Cameron?
Oh yeah. Hey, but what about those lip glosses from the Avon lady? My mom got those every year for Christmas
Yep.
for us.
Yeah.
And for like 20 years in a row by growing
Yeah.
up. So
Those
Yeah,
were
Avon
amazing.
and Mary Kay and Tupperware were like the
Yep.
original MLMs,
OG.
right? Yeah.
And now it's Arbonne.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
Arbonne. I totally
Arbonne.
forgot about Arbonne. Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about for a minute the costs of exiting, because we mentioned that as one way you can tell you're in a cult or a cult-like group. So I'm a person that has made the choice to continue to participate in the Mormon Church, and I think there's costs for me for staying, for participating, because I get marginalized in a lot of ways, and I probably won't ever get to go back to the temple or different things like that I want to do because I have certain behaviors I've chosen not to agree to, and I'm an agnostic and things like that. But so I think sometimes there's costs for staying, but also costs for exiting. And I think those are choices we need to think about. And then the other thing I wanted to comment on and see if anyone else had any thoughts is the family systems again, because I'm enmeshed with my family to some degree, right? I have extended family, I have my immediate family. Um, I have those relationships whether I want them or not. I guess I could completely cut them off if I did want to, and there'd be costs for that. I think families can be cults in some ways, and I don't know how we navigate that without just completely dropping our family, which I don't think is right to do, and I don't think it's effective. And I think there's some, you can set boundaries. But anyway, I'm reading a book right now called Disentangling from Emotionally Immature People, and that talks about setting boundaries in there. But anyway, what are you guys' thoughts on either of those two things? The family as a cult enmeshment, and or costs of staying versus costs of leaving?
I'm going to say that the cost of getting unenmeshed from my family has been, I can't even tell you, tens of thousands of dollars of therapy.
Oh, wow. So I think that you can disentangle yourself from a dysfunctional family, or for whatever reasons you want to, and you create a new family. I mean, family doesn't have to be blood relation.
Correct.
Family can be the people that you choose to be in your life because you respect them and they respect you back, and you allow each other growth and evolution. And, if you don't choose to be around people that don't do that for you, why would you do it just because you happen to have the same bloodline?
And I will get to you, Bruce, but I want to comment on that too, because my wife and I have our 2 adult kids, and I had them, but she adopted them when our daughter was 5 and our son was 2. And then we have created a whole family system outside of our families of origin were fairly supportive, but our kids have uncles and friends and cousins and that are just, I mean, they're all over, and that's our family we've created. And we don't live near all their grandparents have passed away now, but we don't live near any of that family. So we had to create it for ourselves. And it's been, pretty good, I think. I think my kids are both pretty well-rounded and they're doing fine. They both graduated college and have jobs and have dogs, and my daughter has a fiance. And so I think that's just what we've done to cope too, is create our own family. Bruce.
Yeah, because it's not about the bloodline. It's really about the relationship, the emotional support you give and get.
Yeah, I find boundaries are important. I stopped attending church right after I got back from my mission, but I still went to BYU for 3 years. My father was my bishop, and so he signed the ecclesiastical endorsements to keep me around the church in hopes of getting me back. But my family was profoundly unhappy with me. But I don't live in Utah, and my parents didn't live in Utah. And so there was kind of a lot of tension. But as they got older, I was the only person who hung around to take care of them. And they're both dead now. My dad's been dead 25 years, my mom 8 or 9 years. And the boundaries, and like Karen mentioned, and Jackie, my family of choice, I have a very large family of choice from my work. I'm hosting a party. We're inviting 65 people, and I've been retired for a decade. And then I have a family of choice around my friends, and Karen is one of them. We have our friend group and some of the ex-Mormons and stuff. But as you get further away, as your parents get older and pass away, some of that control, goes away. Because now I'm the second oldest of my generation in our family. And we don't talk about religion around me. I plan all the family reunions. There is no family home evening. There is nothing ever on a Sunday. And there's nothing church related in our family reunions because nobody's willing to plan them. I'm willing to plan them. So I just make sure. And about my family is 75% Mormon and Mormonish, 25% never Mormon or ex-Mormon. And so we have those kind of demographics.
Yeah, these are great. These are great comments. And I think that it also matters how much value you put on a relationship, how much you are kind of willing to take, if that makes sense. Like in my case, I never let my parents know anything about what they had no idea that I had even stepped away from the church. And that was just my choice. But the collateral damage is that they passed away never really knowing me, in like the last 20 years of my life. But that was a decision I made and it worked. Then I have children who do know me and know what I do. And several of them are pretty horrible to me as far as, their behavior and what they say. But because I value them and life is long and they are young, I let it ride and I continue the relationship, conceding a lot, giving a lot. And I always say to them, call me when you're 50. Maybe then you'll understand life is long. So it does, I think, depend on the value that you put on the relationship and what you're able to take. So I don't know. These are all great comments. This is a podcast, Landon, this whole topic right here. So, which is good. All right. Let's again say thank you to Jackie. And
yes, it was great.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. And all the comments, you guys are just, I love book club. Everyone's so super smart. I just love it. You guys are amazing. So yeah, let's finish up our slides really quick. Let's have Cultish. Yay. We just finished. Congratulations on all that. Let's have Bruce give a little preview to get us all pumped up and excited for our next book. I am very excited about this. Where did I put it? It's over here somewhere. But yeah, go ahead, Bruce. Let's find out what's in store for April.
Okay, I'm presenting Homo Deus, and I'm making more slides than I can possibly show. So then I will have to cull them down to, this. But Homo Deus is a brief history of tomorrow. This book dives into humanity's future, exploring our desire to become godlike. You all know Harari examines how we tamed famine, plague, and war, which is really big, some of the topics of our previous books. And he poses questions about what our next challenges may be, such as overcoming death and creating artificial life. Landon and I were talking about this before, and this book's a few years old, and he read it earlier and was thinking, some of this stuff's in the future. I agree, but now some of this stuff is right at our doorstep. And so I think this is a good thought-provoking book that we need to take a view of how it was written, I believe in 2015 or so, and how this has progressed. And then he has another book that I might suggest. I'm trying to think, what is it, Nexus? It's his book after that might be a good topic for next year, because Sapiens was our initial book for the book club, and it's been called the ex-Mormon Bible. And so this guy, I think, is a good, interesting thinker, and like Leonardo da Vinci and Alan Turing, I'm inspired because he's a gay guy and I like the way he thinks.
We are excited. Is it this book? This came in my trilogy that I bought. It's not the 21 lessons for the 21st century.
No, that's one he wrote in between, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I got a set of 3. It was cheaper to get our book for this next month in a set of 3 than alone. So I wondered, he's got a lot of good content, but yeah, this is going to be good.
It's Nexus.
Okay. Nexus is the name of the book. So
Yeah.
many books, so little time. Awesome. Well, we are excited about that. Everybody put that on your calendar for the 13th. Just a few quick last slides. We want to make sure that everybody knows that all of our episodes can be found anywhere you listen to audio podcasts. If you're out running or if you're at your cult of your CrossFit gym, you can turn on the Good Book Club and listen to past episodes. We're also, of course, on our YouTube channel. If you search the Good Book Club for Post-Mormons, and we just don't really give that link out, but you guys can find it that way. It's fun to look back at the books that we've read. We also, on Facebook, have something called the Good Media Club. It's basically just a Facebook page where we throw things on that have to do with Mormon content or things that are of interest. So you can just check that out by finding that on Facebook. For example, we threw up the Lori Vallow interview on Dateline, just a little promo for it. And boy, I watched that the other night. So did Landon. If you haven't watched that, that's something. I don't even know how to describe it. I'm still processing it. Of course, Landon and I do Mormonish Podcast, and we often have, a lot of you guys on as guests, because sometimes we'll take book club content and put it over there. It's just so good, but that's a fun place to just check out some of the stuff that's going on in Mormonism. If you're just visiting us here for the first time and you'd like to become a member of the book club, not a cult, not yet. If you're not into social media so much, you can just send me an email at thegoodbookclub@mail.com, not Gmail, but mail. And you can get links and stuff like that. You can get on our email list, and then you can find out what's going on there without having to, go into social media or set some kind of algorithm for yourself. You can also, if you want to, find us on Facebook. That little logo right there is, you can find the Good Book Club and just request to join there. We also put links and information there. We're also on Instagram. Because it's mail.com and not gmail.com, sometimes it goes to spam, but I'll always respond to you. So check it out for sure. And right then we'll say goodbye to everybody.